Trump advisor Roger Stone was convicted in a federal court, correct?
That's my recollection.
Trump donor Elliot Brady was convicted in a federal court, correct?
Also my recollection.
The Attorney General at the time for those two convictions was Bill Barr. Which president nominated Bill Barr for Attorney General?
President Trump.
Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, was convicted in a federal court, correct?
Yes.
Trump's former deputy campaign manager, Mr. Gates, was convicted in a federal court, correct?
That's my recollection.
Trump's campaign foreign policy advisor, George Papadopoulos, was convicted in a federal court, correct?
Yes, I think he pled guilty, yes.
The Attorney General at the time of those three cases was Jeff Sessions. Which president nominated Jeff Sessions for Attorney General?
President Trump.
All of these folks were convicted under the administrations of three separate Republican attorneys general. It is not the fault of the FBI that Donald Trump surrounded himself with criminals. Donald Trump brought that upon himself.
Today, I'm introducing a new amendment that would prevent President Biden or any president from selling our strategic oil reserves for political reasons. And to imagine that President Biden would say that he would not consider this bill, President Biden is telling America that he doesn't care about our emergency supply or our national security.
I can summarize this debate of the last 2 days into one sentence. Joe Biden lowered your gas prices and Republicans are upset about it. That's what this is about. The U.S. made $4 billion on Joe Biden's action. Republicans always want to say, well, let's run government like a business. Joe Biden did exactly that when he lowered your gas prices and then made a $4 billion profit for the United States of America. So recently, a member of the Republican caucus was asked, a member from Tennessee, what we're going to do to fix school violence, and his answer was,
we're not going to fix it. Criminals are going to be criminals, and my daddy fought in the Second World War, fought in the Pacific, fought the Japanese, and he told me, he said, buddy, he said, if somebody wants to take you out and doesn't mind losing their life, there's not a whole heck of a lot you can do about it.
Well, Democrats have a different view. Instead of wasting time on political stunts like H.R. 1, let's pass universal background checks into law. Here's this chart. It shows that under Trump, there were 133,000 border apprehensions in May 2019. And last month, under the Biden administration, there were less than 100,000 border apprehensions. The facts show the southern border is doing better last month than it was under Trump in May 2019. Thank you, Secretary Mayorkas, for your public service. And now the Republicans want to impeach you. Good luck with that one. What happened on January 6th is that Donald Trump's supporters showed up because he told them to. They marched to the Capitol because he told them to. They attacked the Capitol because he told them to stop the steal. That is the truth, and that is how history is going to record it. Thank you for prosecuting those who attacked our nation's Capitol. I yield back.
So in addition to doing stupid stuff and trying to pass extreme bills, Republicans have now gone on a rampage about what the Manhattan District Attorney is doing without even knowing what the purported charges are or what the grand jury evidence is. No one is above the law, not the former president's enablers, not the former president's attorneys, and not the former president himself. Joe Biden lowered your gas prices last year, and that makes Republicans mad. And how do we know? They said it out loud. The gentlewoman from Georgia earlier this morning just said that Joe Biden lowered your gas prices for political reasons.
President Biden abused his power to sell our oil, reduce gas prices so that the midterm elections would swing Democrats' way. It's a shame to trick the American people just to win an election. There's no reason the president should be able to sell one of our most strategic resources for political gain. Instead, the president should unleash American energy at home. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment and yield back.
You know, I don't care why a president lowers your gas prices. If any president can lower your gas prices, we should support that president's action. And if prices surge later this year, if gas prices surge again, Joe Biden should be able to use the tools at his disposal and lower your gas prices again. We should be giving the president even more flexibility to use the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to lower your gas prices. Joe Biden lowered your gas prices, and Republicans want to keep him from doing that again. We don't want to stop the president from lowering your gas prices. We want Joe Biden to lower your gas prices again if he could do that. But there's another reason this Republican bill is so stupid. Because not only did Joe Biden lower your gas prices, the United States of America made a profit on it. Buy low, sell high. It was brilliant what Joe Biden did. He released the Strategic Petroleum Reserve at prices when gases were high, and that's helped lower the gas prices, and then he refilled it at the lower amount. The U.S. made $4 billion on Joe Biden's action. Republicans always want to say, well, let's run government like a business. Joe Biden did exactly that when he lowered your gas prices and then made a $4 billion profit for the United States of America. Adopt my amendment, which would make this stupid bill better, and then vote against this bill. What if the evidence is overwhelming? What if it's rock solid that an American by the name of Donald Trump committed crimes? How do Republicans know? They don't. And you know what else they cannot explain? When Trump's former attorney, Michael Cohen, was arrested, indicted, convicted, and went to prison for participating in an illegal hush money payment scheme to Stormy Daniels, not a single Republican leader complaining now said a thing about what happened to Michael Cohen. They cannot explain why they are holding Donald Trump to a different standard. Michael Prison served prison time for participating in an illegal hush money payment scheme to Stormy Daniels. In America, we should apply the same standard to all Americans. Let's wait to see if there are going to be any charges, what those charges may be, and what the evidence is. And then a jury or judge will get to hear this evidence, and the American people will see it, and the prosecution would have to show, beyond a reasonable doubt, with their evidence. And let me conclude with this. Every American, including Donald Trump, is entitled to the presumption of innocence in a court of law, and that presumption will also be applied. So let's just apply the law equally the way that our founders wanted it to be done. Last term, when Democrats were in control, we put people over politics and passed a bipartisan infrastructure law to rebuild your roads, bridges, and highways, to take lead out of water pipes, and to put broadband internet everywhere, from rural areas to cities to suburbs and everywhere in between. This year, when Republicans took control of the House, what did they do? They spent the enormous resources of their committee staff and the time and attention of their members to hold not one, but 2 hearings complaining about Twitter. They also took turns to read the United States Constitution on the House floor. How does that help you, the American people? It doesn't. But it's worse than that. Republicans are actually trying to now pass extreme bills that are going to actively harm American families. This week, we're going to vote on a bill that's going to make it easier for books to be banned at schools. It is also going to violate the privacy rights of students. Because if your child, unfortunately, has an eating disorder, or is cyberbullied, or is harassed, or is bullied, that information is going to have to be posted on a public website that the school has. And every other student, every parent is going to know that this is happening at the school. That's an outrageous violation of privacy. And let me tell you, what are the amendments that Republicans rejected when Democrats tried to make this extreme bill better? Here are some amendments Republicans rejected. Republicans voted no on an amendment to remove lead pipes from schools. Republicans voted no on an amendment to ensure kids had access to healthy meals. Republicans voted no on an amendment to help keep firearms out of schools. Republicans voted no on an amendment to prevent schools from monitoring students' menstrual cycles. Republicans also voted no on an amendment to prevent the censorship of the teaching of the Holocaust. This is an extreme bill. It's going to do horrible things to students' privacy, and it's going to increase books that are banned at schools. I rise to oppose the Polluters Over People Act It's an extreme MAGA Republican bill that will increase pollution by lowering environmental standards. It will increase climate change by removing a lot of provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act designed to combat climate change, and it increases the deficit. According to the Congressional Budget Office, it will increase the deficit by over $2.4 million just as one bill alone. So it's like a triple threat of badness, right? It increases pollution, increases global warming, increases the deficit. Now let's just take a review of what we've done up to now. So last term, when Democrats were in control, we passed laws that moved the American family forward. We passed the American Rescue Plan that got our economy back on track as we were coming out of a pandemic. We then followed that up with the infrastructure law to rebuild roads and bridges and highways, to take lead out of water pipes, and to put broadband everywhere, from rural areas to inner cities and everywhere in between. We then followed that up with the Chips and Science Act that's going to bring manufacturing back to the United States. And then we followed that up with the Inflation Reduction Act, which not only helped reduce the deficit, Democrats reduced the deficit by over $1.7 trillion last year, but that Inflation Reduction Act also had the highest number of climate change projects and the highest amount of climate change funding in world history. This term, when Republicans took control, what'd y'all do? Well, let me tell you. You read the Constitution on the House floor. You took turns doing that. You also held not one, but 2 congressional hearings complaining about Twitter. But it's more than just stupid stuff. Extreme MAGA Republicans are now passing or trying to pass extreme MAGA Republican bills like H.R. 1 that's going to, again, increase climate change, increase pollution, and increase the deficit. And it's also a monumental waste of time because guess what? This bill ain't going anywhere. It's not going to pass the Senate because you need to override it, filibuster. That ain't going to happen. Even if it miraculously does that, the president, his administration has already signaled that they're going to veto it. So we're just wasting time here when we should be focused on more relevant issues like how do we prevent gun violence at schools? And my heart goes out to the victims of the tragic mass shooting yesterday in Nashville. 3 of the victims were 9-year-old children. Instead of wasting time on political stunts like H.R. 1, let's pass universal background checks into law. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The House Judiciary Committee has the responsibility of helping to ensure the rule of law. Unfortunately, this committee's chairman ignored a bipartisan congressional subpoena. The horrible precedent set by this chairman has damaged the credibility of all congressional committees in seeking information from witnesses and damaged the rule of law. Attorney General Garland, thank you for your public service, and thank you for being here today. I'd like to start by showing a video of January 6th, and then I'm going to ask you some questions about that day.
Hey, brother, we're boots on the ground here. We're moving on to Capitol now. I'll give you a boots on the ground update here in a few.
Multiple capital entries! Multiple capital entries! We're still taking metal, sharpened objects, missiles to include bottles and rocks, and hand-thrown chemical-grade fireworks. This is now effectively a riot.
1349 hours declaring it a riot.
Attorney General Garland, the Department of Justice charged over 1,100 defendants in connection with the attack on our Capitol, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I'm going to state 2 facts. The people who showed up on January 6th to attack the nation's Capitol were supporters of Donald Trump. They attacked the Capitol to stop Congress from certifying the fact that Donald Trump lost the election. Those two facts were so horrible that some in the right-wing media and some Republican members of Congress could not handle that, so they made up conspiracy theories. In fact, Donald Trump called January 6th a beautiful day. He said the people who showed up had love in their hearts. The Republican member of Congress said January 6th was like a normal tourist visit, and some Republicans have said there were no weapons used on January 6th. Attorney General Garland, were there weapons used in the attack on January 6th?
Yes, in the video, you already saw some of the weapons that were used, and there are obviously many more, many hours of video.
Another conspiracy theory is that somehow the FBI actually orchestrated this attack. So I'm going to go through some cases that have gone through completion and resulted in sentencing. Joe Biggs was sentenced to 17 years in prison for seditious conspiracy and other counts related to attack on our nation's capital. Have you seen any shred of evidence that Joe Biggs was an FBI agent?
No.
In fact, Joe Biggs was a member of the Proud Boys. This is what Assistant U.S. Attorney Connor Monroe stated about Joe Biggs and the Proud Boys in court. He stated, quote, "They saw themselves as Donald Trump's army, fighting to keep their preferred leader in power no matter what the law or the courts had to say about it." And on September 4th, Joe Biggs stated that he is confident Trump will pardon him. He said, quote, "Oh, I know he'll pardon us. We're his supporters. We went there like he asked." I'd like to now ask you about the case of Stuart Rhodes, who was sentenced to 18 years in prison for the attack on our nation's capital. Have you seen any shred of evidence that Stuart Rhodes was an FBI agent?
No.
In fact, he was the founder of the Oath Keepers, a far-right paramilitary organization. Rhodes asked Donald Trump to call them up as militia. And then I'd like to ask you about Enrique Tarrio, who was sentenced to 22 years in the attack on our nation's capital. Have you seen any evidence that Enrique Tarrio was an FBI agent?
He was not an FBI agent.
In fact, he was the leader of the Proud Boys. What happened on January 6th is that Donald Trump's supporters showed up because he told them to. They marched to the Capitol because he told them to. They attacked the Capitol because he told them to stop the steal. That is the truth, and that is how history is going to record it. Thank you for prosecuting those who attacked our nation's capital. I yield back. Thank you, Chairman Jordan. The House Judiciary Committee is responsible for helping to ensure the rule of law. Unfortunately, the chair of this committee ignored a bipartisan congressional subpoena. The actions of the chair have undermined the credibility of all congressional committees in seeking information from witnesses and damaged the rule of law. Now, Secretary Mayorkas, thank you for your public service. I'd like to discuss with you the history of the southern border. In September 1969, a few years before Watergate consumed this presidential administration, the president launched Operation Intercept, which basically shut down the southern border. Less than 3 weeks later, that operation was stopped because it largely failed to address the issues at the border. Secretary Mayorkas, who was the Republican president in 1969?
Congressman, I have to think back sequentially in reverse chronology, but I'm sure you know the answer
He resigned.
immediately.
I'll give you a hint. This Republican president resigned.
Congressman, I know the president, President Nixon.
Thank you. After Nixon resigned in 1974, his vice president became president. But the issues at the border continued, and in 1976, the president stated, quote, 80 to 90% of the heroin that comes in the United States today comes across from our southern border, end quote. Secretary Mayorkas, who was the Republican president in 1976? The vice president to Nixon.
I'm sorry?
He was the vice president to Richard Nixon.
Gerald Ford, are you
Yes,
speaking
that's
of?
correct.
Yeah,
And then,
Congressman, I'd prefer not to answer questions of history right now. My focus is on
Right.
the work
I'm
of the
gonna help
Department
you
of
with it.
Homeland Security.
I'm going to help you with this. In the 1980s, the Republican president had promised morning in America again. But the issues at the southern border continued, prompting him to order a partial shutdown of the border in 1985. This operation, aptly named Operation Intercept 2, was stopped after only a few days because it also failed to address the issues at the border. And this was a president that knew about these issues because he was a former governor of California. Secretary Mayorkas, who was the Republican president in 1985?
Ronald Reagan,
Thank you.
Congressman.
The border issues continued into this century. In 2006, the president, who was also familiar with the border because he was a former governor of Texas, declared that, quote, for decades, the United States has not been in complete control of its borders, end quote. Secretary Mayorkas, who was the Republican president in 2006?
President Bush,
Okay.
Congressman.
In the prior administration, the Republican president tried to solve their issues at the border, and he failed. I would now like to show a video of what was actually happening during the prior administration in 2018. So you can play the video.
This is a pit stop on a punishing journey to the U.S. border, and it's still just the beginning. Migrants from Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador continue to make their way north, fleeing poverty, persecution, and gang violence. The caravan now includes an estimated 7,200 migrants, and more are expected to join tomorrow, potentially pushing the number past 10,000.
In May 2019, the situation got even worse. Politico published an article on June 5th, 2019, that was titled, Border Arrests Rose to Nearly 132,000 in May as the border surge continues. Secretary Mayorkas, who was the Republican president in 2018 and 2019?
President Trump, Congressman.
And now we're here in 2023. Secretary Mayorkas, last month in June, border crossings declined to the lowest level in over 2 years, correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the?
Border crossings last month declined to the lowest level in over 2 years, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Politico published an article last week that stated approximately 99,545 individuals were apprehended last month, the first time the figure dropped below 100,000 in more than 2 years. That data is largely correct, right?
I believe so, yes.
All right. The facts show the southern border is doing better last month than it was under Trump in May 2019. Thank you, Secretary Mayorkas, for your public service. And now the Republicans want to impeach you. Good luck with that one. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.